It's a pleasure having you join us today. We're going to have a very interesting conversation on Terry's book, When God Lost an Election. Really, did God lose any election? The man who put the question to us is here to speak to us. Good to have you, Terry.
Good to be here, Evans. Thanks for having me.
It's been 2 years since you published this wonderful piece, When God
Yeah,
Lost an Election, the
yes.
political market of demand and supply. How
hmm
does it feel? And what has been the journey so far, 2 years after publication?
Well, it's been good. The book has been seen that from the title, it's been seen to be lightly controversial, talking about the fact that God lost an election. But I'm an author, so I had to use that as a literary device to create a certain image of how sometimes good leaders don't necessarily, or good people don't necessarily win elections to become the kind of leaders we want in Africa and in Ghana, of course. So it's been an exciting journey. It's been great, and it has sparked conversations in several quarters, and the conversations continue.
In the literal sense.
Can you come again?
I said, now that you said you had to use that as a metaphor or God as a
Yeah.
metaphor, would you want to break it down for the average person who might be listening to you for the first time on this interesting title?
The simple thing is that often we talk about the fact that we need good leaders to lead our country and our countries in Africa and in various places of the world. But it's not every time that we get good people winning elections. Democracy that we practice doesn't always bring out the best in terms of leadership. It's the people's choice that prevails. So when we talk about good leaders, or the fact that we don't have good leaders in Ghana or in Africa, it means that we don't have good people who are voting, or the people who are voting for the wrong leaders. So it means that it's possible that there are some good people who would have been good leaders, but they just don't get to win elections.
That's very interesting. You remind me of Quintilian.
hmm
Quintilian is a man those of us interested in public speaking tend to quote often.
Okay.
Teacher, philosopher, and an educator as well. He said that, and I quote, the ideal of commendable speech making is a good person speaking well.
Wow.
The ideal of commendable speech making is a good person speaking well. In other
Okay.
words, we're likely to have people who are eloquent, they can speak the words you want to hear with the passion, the tonation, every bit about public speaking, they'll take the box. But leave them off the stage, and their character will be a different subject for discussion. I think if I should put it that way, the quintillion principle applies here in the sense that
That's
you're talking about leaders who do not win elections simply because they do not have, if you like, the influences of the demand side of the political market, as you put it.
yeah.
So no matter how or what they are offering or supplying, they don't get the demand of it. And that's how come they are not in the landscape.
That is the hope.
Now, you touched on democracy. You touched on democracy in your earlier submission.
Yes.
And you also made reference to, uh, I studied government back in Prempeh College. So when you touch on government of the people, by the people, for the people, Abraham Lincoln, you are striking a chord within. Would you want to highlight that?
Yes, I let me do that then. I am a big believer in democracy. All right. I mean, I think what I said earlier may make people think that I believe in democracy. And this whole book is about democracy. But the point I make is that for any governance system, especially a democratic governance system to work effectively, it needs the participation of the people. So Abraham Lincoln's famous definition of democracy, government of the people, government for the people, for the people and by the people. So you can have the best leaders, even some we can have the best people in leadership. But if the people do not support the policies of the people in leadership, then there is no way their policies are going to work. So that's the whole point about democracy. So for us in Ghana and those of us in Africa, when we are talking about good leaders, it's not enough to have good leaders, good people in office. It's also important that the people, we, the public, the masses, the electorate, we support the good policies of the leaders in office. Or better still, the whatever we are getting is what we are buying from the politicians. So if
Mm.
there, we think there is a lot of corruption, it means that by our votes and our choices, we are tolerating corruption. If we think there is poverty, by our votes and by our choices, we are supporting policies that do not help eradicate poverty. And so no government
Mm.
by itself will be able to solve all the problems, or no leader by himself will be able to solve the problems that we face in our society. We need the collective will and endorsement of the people for that to happen. Because one of the issues about democracy, we talk about term limits. And somebody comes to office and they have
Yes.
about 4 years, in some countries about 5 years. They have to do whatever they want to do. Many of Now it's becoming a norm in democracy that after 2 terms you have to go. So now imagine somebody who comes to office has to face elections in the next 4 years, and their policies are going to take maybe 10 years to mature. But in the meantime, those policies will make us uncomfortable. So while they are making us uncomfortable, the people are complaining, and the opposition is taking advantage of that to get you out of office. If you are a politician in office, what would you do? You have to be in power. Because the other thing I
Ye-
hear people say is that we need politicians who don't care about winning or losing election. But they are doing the thing that will make them, will transform us. But those same things are making them lose election. And you are the people who are voting against them. And you are at the same time saying that we need people who don't care about winning or losing election. In any case, if somebody loses an election,
mhm.
how do they get to implement the good things they want to do? The next person will come and turn
You touch
everything
on that on
around.
the book because if you do
Yes,
not have the power or the will of the people or a part
exactly,
of the will of the people, you cannot implement that what you believe will make them a
exactly.
better group of people.
So Abraham
So
Lincoln's
it's
definition is
really about the people.
about the people. It's not just about even elections. Abraham Lincoln's definition is not just about elections. It's about the people participating in governance, like throughout the term of a government in various ways.
And that's very interesting because in chapter 5 of your book, in fact, you close your book with, if I should put it that way, a vote for action, a
Yes,
citizen participation.
yes. So
And it's very interesting reading through that bit because I believe everybody who reads the book or who should read, I mean, everybody should read that book, your book, for especially that part, because you make a very interesting point. Right from the day we go to queue, if you're in Ghana or other part of Africa as we do, go to queue to vote. That is where we need to understand that we are actually setting a process in motion. It
exactly.
is not 3 years after when things are not going well, then we start complaining. I
No.
mean, for those of us in Ghana, these days you walk around and people, so who voted for this government? Who voted? And I've always asked why this question keeps coming when things are not going well. We all know who we voted for.
Yes.
At least I know. So
Yes.
why do we tend to pretend that we do not know? What it tells us is we do not analyze the whole process as much as we should. And
Yeah.
therefore, we have not accepted the responsibility of our part in the process, which
Exactly.
is, in effect, we actually vote them into office. So the power is ours, which we lend to them, like you mentioned, in some instances, 4 years, 5 years in other jurisdictions, and so on. So before we even get to the part about God and the analogy you use with the people of Israel making a demand for a king and a leader and so on, what do you have to say to the average person, or should I use the word, the ordinary person listening to us about why we need to take the responsibility we have as quote unquote the people seriously to ensure that our vote count. Count here means is valued beyond just casting the ballot.
Because when we vote for someone, we are voting for ourselves. It's about we are putting our beliefs, we're putting our dreams, we are putting our ambitions and our destiny at stake. Because the policies that they implement, so if inflation goes up, it affects money in your pocket. If there is instability in the country, it affects your ability to do business and all that. So it's not something we have to do on an emotional level, but it has to be something we think
Mm,
about, we rationalize, and we do. So
mm.
you can vote for one party in this particular election cycle, but in another cycle, you can decide to vote for somebody else because they are speaking a certain language that resonates with your dreams and with your visions and all that. But the reality is
In
that
other words, our vote should not be on autopilot,
no,
right?
no, no, not it shouldn't be. And the reality also is that sometimes you will even vote for someone who comes and who promises well, which aligns with you. But when they come into office, in the course of
Mm,
implementing what they said they will implement, that implementation also brings some difficulty. There's an analogy I use in the
mhm.
book, which is why one of the reasons why I'm not so in support of benevolent dictatorship, where people think that we need democracy doesn't work, we need dictators and all of that. Solomon in the Bible, King Solomon in biblical age,
Yes,
he
yes.
was reputed to be a very good king, developed his kingdom, he
A
became very
wise, a wise
famous, a
man.
wise man and all that. And people came to see and to witness his wisdom and everything. One day, the Queen of
Yeah,
Sheba came to Solomon and she was so impressed. And she said that, wow, I mean, what I've seen here, I mean, what they told me is not even close to what I've seen. You are far better than
that's right.
we thought. That means the people who
Twice
serve you
as what
must
I
be
was
very,
told.
the people who serve you must be very privileged. They must feel very proud
Mm,
and happy to be in your kingdom, to be working for you. But guess what happened?
mm.
When Solomon died and his son succeeded him, the first petition Solomon received, now I mean his son Jeroboam received, was a complaint
Yes.
against Solomon.
Mm.
It was a complaint against Solomon. It was not something to honor Solomon's memory, but a complaint. They came to him and said that, look, when your father was king, he made us work too hard. Taxes were high. So can you reduce the burden so we will cooperate with you? Then the guy went to speak to Solomon's father's advisors, the king who had died, his advisors, elderly,
Mm,
and they told him that, yeah, listen to what the people are saying. What it means is that even when Solomon was alive, his own
mhm.
advisor, he didn't take the advice of his own advisors. And then the fact that the petition came
Yeah.
asking him to reduce the burden means that the people were not in
Mhm.
support of what he was implementing, of the policies he implemented that made the kingdom flourish. So the point,
Terry,
yes,
hold on right there. Just hold that thought for me.
okay.
One, in summary, that should I use the word? It was more of a politically induced propaganda in the current sense. And the issue of consultation
Mm-hmm,
in the Ghanaian system, for example,
mm-hmm.
and I'm Ghana, so I can't
Yeah,
speak for other jurisdictions.
yeah.
We have the Council of State who are
Mm-hmm,
supposed to more or less take, or the president is supposed to take major decisions in consultation with the Council of State as the
yeah.
Constitution puts it. Is that not what is playing out here? For instance, I've heard the former president, President
Mm-hmm.
Kufuor, say that we should recently made the public pronouncement to that effect that it should be scrapped. Others
And replaced
have
with and replaced
and
with a
replaced
second
with
chamber of parliament.
a second chamber of parliament. Now, when that happens, or if that statement is one we should stand on to make some conclusion, then in effect is rendering the Council of State, quote unquote, ineffective.
Mhm.
My point here is, how can we, let's not even push it at the national level, at our individual and organizational levels,
Mhm.
how do we make sure we put in place effective systems of consultation, quote and unquote? Because in the Jeroboam example you are citing, he did two consultations,
Yes,
one with the aged group and one with his peers. And
yes.
we know the outcome of the two.
Mhm.
So it tells me that it is good to consult, but if you're not careful, the person you consult or the group you consult can actually, in a way, influence you in the adverse sense. So, what would be your thought? And the story you shared about Solomon and the Queen of Sheba is what you write beautifully in chapter 5 of your book. So,
Yeah,
I'm taking your thought outside of the book.
no problem.
What would you recommend that as an individual, as a citizen, as the leader of a small group or a company, what do I put in place to make sure that when I make the effort to consult, I'm getting the right advice?
All right. So the thing about right advice, especially in the context of governance, it's not just
Yes.
about, it's not so much, for me, the point I'm making, even in the book, it's not so much about the rightness or wrongness of the advice, not about the quality of the advice. It's more about the knowing the will of the people. Because
Mm.
in government or in governance, you are not the leader is not there to do what they think is good for the nation. The leader is there to do what the people want done. You have the mandate of the people. It's a representative mandate you have. You represent the people. So in the context of governance, that's how it is. So you have to know the pulse of the people so that you do what the people want you to do. It's not about you doing what you think is right. That is the
Terry, I
controversy of
agree with you
democracy. So
to
even
the
in
extent that
terms of, yeah,
to the extent that I need to listen, or the leader needs to listen to the people and do what they wish for. Yes, but you and I also know that the majority is not always right, or what they
yes,
may
I
what sometimes what they want is not what they need. So
which is something I've
there is
captured
some
in chapter four,
responsibility on you.
of the book.
Exactly, exactly. There's some responsibility on you as the leader to be able to decipher what they want from what they need. Because if you don't, then they will come back at you, like you rightly mentioned,
So okay, so
what led to the uprising and
the
so on.
moment a leader starts doing that, then you are getting into the realm of dictatorship. And we know how
It's a
dictatorship
dicey
starts. So
situation,
what should
sincerely.
happen? So what should happen
Mm.
is that if you are a leader and you believe that the people need something, something is good for the people, not impose it on the people. Part of
Right,
your competence as a leader should be to convince the people to buy into that particular policy. If you don't convince the people to buy into it, then you have no business implementing it, shoving it down the throat of the people because it's
right.
not your mandate. They have put you there
Mm.
to work for them. They've put you there to work for them. So you have to convince them to do it. If you can't do what they want, then you have to be there. The moment you begin to
In
think
other
that
words, mm,
I know what is good
mm,
for you, this is what is good, even though this is what you want, let me do this is then you are becoming a dictator
a
and
dictator.
which eventually will be overthrown anyway, as we've seen all over the world. Because
In
the
other words, or you think you know what is good for them, which might not be the case because they also have their own wishes.
and it may even be good for them, truly. What you think is good for them may really be what is good for them. The point is that as the guy who led the Egyptian Arab Spring wrote, he wrote the title of a book he wrote is called the Revolution 2.0, and the subtitle, which I even quoted a bit in the book, said the power of the
Yes.
people is greater than the people in
The
power.
That's
You,
right.
one person, as the whichever one person who happens to be the leader of the country, you cannot impose your ideas on the whole country forever.
Right.
It's not gonna work. It may work for a while, as
A
long as the
while.
people tolerate you. And eventually, when they are tired and they want you out, they will get you out, which we saw in the Arab Spring. No, these leaders
Hmm.
had been there for many years, whether it's in Egypt or Tunisia or Algeria or Sudan, they have been there for several years, for decades. And the people at a point were even afraid of them. But when the people got tired and they went on the streets, they sent soldiers, they imposed curfew, they did whatever, and the people did not budge. What happened to the leaders? They all disappeared. They all eventually left. So you cannot come and say
The
that
power of the people is
it's stronger
more
than the
power
people in power.
than the people in power.
Yes.
That's a good one. That takes me to what I think is the summary of the whole book, or the core, the
Yeah.
people's king.
Okay.
First Samuel 8,
Yes.
5.
Yes.
I can imagine how the man was feeling when, out of nowhere, and after all that they had seen him do, they make this claim,
Mm-hmm.
make us a king like the other nations.
Mm-hmm.
In Chi will say, "Go for your bunyaye."
So wait, the people are
such
ungrateful.
such ingratitude. Yes.
Yeah.
So talk us through that concept you
That
used
is
to
a very
develop the book.
interesting concept. Eh? So God had been the leader of Israel. To use modern language, I would say God had been the president of Israel. So in the book, I refer to him as President God.
The
Just that
God,
it was
yeah.
a theocracy. So God combined the powers of the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. So God was making the laws and implementing the laws and all that. And in a theocracy, sovereignty is with God, not with the people. So where there are leaders in
Yes.
God decides the laws, God is everything, ultimate authority is in God. And but if you look at
So
the
it's assumed it's an
yeah,
assumption, yeah. A safe
okay,
one at
yes,
that, yeah.
yes. So God had led these people for so many years, took them out of bondage in Egypt, they crossed the Red Sea, he gave them manna, like so many good things, which I don't want to go into. And then one day the people just wake up and say that we don't want you to be our leader anymore. We want to be like the other nation. The other nation, they had human kings. The kings led them in battle
Like,
and all of that.
that's my point of interest,
We
sincerely.
want to have a
Like
leader
the other.
like the other nations. When they made that
Mm.
request, they were warned that the leader you're going to get is going to impose hardship on you. You'll be corrupt. You'll force your young men into war. You'll take over your businesses and all of that. Even after the warning, the people still said that even so, we want to be like the other nations. That was the request they
Mm.
made. We want to be like the other nations. So they didn't want to
Mm.
be like the nation they had. So they became like that and they got a king. And what was the king they got? In First Samuel chapter 9, we are introduced to the king they got, to this new king, a gentleman called Saul.
Mm.
And Saul is introduced. They tell us in the introduction we get of Saul, we are told about who his father is, the village he comes from. We are told about his physical attributes. He is tall and the most handsome person
Yeah.
in the whole kingdom, Israel. Nothing was said about his character. Nothing was
Mm.
said about his competence. Nothing was said about his track record. Nothing, absolutely nothing. They just told us where he comes from and then who his father is and then how handsome and how tall he is. Because they said
All the dimensions.
they wanted to be like the other nations.
Like the
Like and
other
they
nations.
and the other nations, many of them practiced monarchy. And in the monarchy, if you were disabled, you couldn't be king. If you were not of a certain height, you would be seen to
The
be
stature.
of the stature and all that. So, and you had to come from a certain family in order to be accepted as a monarch. So
Yeah.
it was the same criteria God used to in getting them the new king. So one of the things I say is that Saul, who became the first king of Israel, was not God's choice. was not God's choice. Even
Mm.
though if you look at the process, it will look as if he was, but he was not God's choice. He was the people's choice. The people made
The people's choice, yes.
a specific request.
Mm.
We want a king or a leader who, like the other nations, and that was exactly what they got. So,
Wow.
but even that, when Saul becomes king, so Saul
Mm.
emerged as a result of the people's desire and all of that. But we see that there
Mm.
were some instances when he wanted to do the right thing. But because of the pressure of the people, he couldn't.
Right.
So there were two instances I cite in the book, but one of the very
Yes.
famous ones was when they were going to war, and Samuel had said that, okay, you wait for me, but I'll come and perform this ceremony, this ritual before you start the battle. And then he was waiting. He had waited for about 7 days, and now the king's soldiers were putting pressure on him. Samuel is not coming. We need to go. They were getting agitated and they started even scattering. And he got afraid that
Mm.
if he doesn't take the power by himself, so by this time there is now separation of powers, as we will say in
Yes.
modern government.
Yes.
So what happened was that he was waiting for how do you call it? He was waiting for Samuel, who is now the judge, more or less the chief justice of of Israel, to come and do his bit. But he didn't come. And so he took the
Mm.
power by himself and he did it. So when
Mm.
Samuel comes, he asks, "What have you done?" He said, "Oh, I was waiting, but the people made me do it.
The people.
Made
The
me do it."
people.
So even
The people.
when he didn't want to do it, he felt the
Mm-hmm.
pressure of the people to do what was
Mm.
right, to do what was wrong. So
Mm.
what I'm saying is that could it be that there were times that our leaders in office, they know that we have to do this, this will be good for the country, but the moment we do it, the people will not be
We'll
happy,
lose.
or
Right.
we are going to lose the election. So what do we
Mm-hmm.
do? Because if
Mm.
doing that will make you lose an election, then what's the point? Because
Mm.
when you will lose the election and your opponent will come and turn it around, or that policy will not be sustained. So
And whilst reading through your book, one of the things that came to mind was the issue of perception.
yeah,
In our context, a lot of the things that make us suffer is purely based on perception. For
exactly.
example, the member of parliament feels obliged to go for the funeral of the constituent because if
Mhm.
he doesn't go, he's going to be perceived to be not liking the people.
Oh, yeah.
Meanwhile, most of the time they have to trade off other equally important assignments. In fact, core assignments to be as such functions. But because they cherish having good brand or image, which is the perception that people have of them, they will choose to go or do what will make the people happy. And in the end, some of them they suffer for it because they will come back to say, "Oh no, cry, I call parliament or call parliament and say or bizarre question." They will have all sorts of reasons to make
Yes.
you look bad again. The last point I will make as we bring this discussion or brief conversation to a close has to do with there seems to me, I mean, it comes across to me whilst reading the book that there's a thin line between political leadership and what will happen in the corporate sense. So you could be a great leader in the corporate space, but could struggle to lead the people if you are appointed into a political office. Do you agree?
Well, not entirely. There is some sense in what you are saying. There is some truth in what you are saying. But
Mhm.
even in business leadership, too, your voters here will say, I will be your customers. So
Okay.
as it is in the political sense. So in business too, when you are producing a product that customers don't like, what are you going to do? You can't force customers to accept products they don't want. So it's
Mm.
always about understanding what the customers want or what the needs of the customers are and providing solutions to meet the needs. But if the customers don't think that your solution, your product doesn't serve their need, they will vote against your product. And that is what I'm saying happens in politics. Just that the marketing strategy you use in business which is what businesses do to convince customers to buy their
For us.
product, will be slightly different from what you will use to get in the political context to get voters to accept your policies. But in terms
Well,
of the principle, it's almost the same.
very well. In terms of the principle, maybe going into the nitty-gritties, we would have found the point of divergence. But
Yeah.
Terry, in brief, what do we expect from you as a writer going forward? 2 years, it's been 2 years since you published when
Yeah, putting me on the spot. Well,
you know
I
the question that writers got asked often is what are you writing? What are you working on?
I working on. Oh well, I'm working on a few things. So let's just keep our fingers crossed because I don't want to say anything. I don't know which will come out yet, but there are a number of things I have on my desk. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes.
Great.
Yeah.
That said, in sum or in closing, what would you want to share with those who are yet to read When God Lost an Election?
Oh, that was they should read it. It's available. It's largely available online because this book we've done it with a continental perspective. So a lot of
Sure.
the marketing has been online, and I have a lot of things on my YouTube channel about the book. I've done a lot of discussions and excerpts about the book, so they can get a lot of it on my YouTube channel, which has my name Terry Mante, so they can easily find it and get more. But any online portal they know, those in Nigeria can get it on Bambooks or Okada Books. It's on
Right.
Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble, it's on Kobo, almost any global bookstore that you know about. There's a possibility that When God Lost that Election is there, and my other books too.
Fantastic. And
So
your other books. How many are there now?
for now there are
Oh,
10.
you
There are
10.
10 at
Great.
the moment. So,
Terry, thank you so much. It's been a
oh,
pleasure having
thank
this
you for having
conversation
me.
with you. I believe it will be a stepping stone for some conversations
Yes,
in some spaces I believe should listen because it is about the people.
yes,
And even God had a difficult time trying to convince the people when the people garnered up and wanted what they wanted.
yeah.
So it's important we place the people where they belong and have the right value system to make things work. I am confident that in the coming years, Ghana, Nigeria, Africa as a whole will be able to find the right leaders who would listen to the will of the people and know exactly what they can do to make it materialize. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having this conversation with me. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Bye.